Erin, just so you know, the music is a little scratchy. So I'm just wondering if you have videos that might be a thought, but it's just a little scratchy.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, let's get started. All right, bonjour et bienvenue. We're so glad that you are here. With the support of the Ministry of Education and under the leadership of the OMLTA, modules are created to support FSL teacher retention and recruitment. The purpose of these modules is to deepen the understanding of the directions, principles, and content of the Ontario curriculum policy documents for all 3 of the province's FSL programs. We will be sharing the content of Module 2. In this module, we will explore effective and equitable instructional practices, tools, and strategies to support FSL teachers for in-person, hybrid, and virtual settings. Our focus will be on developing student confidence, engagement, and proficiency in FSL using CFR-inspired principles and practices. We will also explore effective and equitable instructional and assessment strategies in order to honor student voice and lived experiences. A copy of this slide deck, the video for this module, and a recording of this webinar as a YouTube link is available on www.omlta.org. So this is what the site looks like. When you go onto the OMLTA website, you will see this. And when you click on this link, it will bring you to a Google site where you can access all of the information that you see. Erin, do you want to click on the next one? Yeah, so this is what you will see once you see the Dare to Unmute FSL on OMLTA. You click on that, it brings you to this and the links to everything from the module slide deck to recorded video webinar. This recorded webinar as well as the video is accessible here.
Alors, bonjour à tous et à toutes. My name is Erin Colson. I've been a teacher in the Peel District School Board for approximately 15 years. I've spent most of my career as a French immersion intermediate educator, although I did spend some time teaching core French. For the past 2 years, I have worked as a modern learning resource teacher, supporting K-12 educators in Peel.
Bonjour, I am Wendy Chan. I have been a teacher in the Durham District School Board for just over 25 years. I have been the lead core French teacher in our board for the last 10 years and was our board's FSL coach for 2 years during that time. I have returned to the classroom with a genuine passion and enthusiasm for teaching core French, and I'm so thrilled to be able to share with you some effective instructional practices with you today.
So we are speaking to you tonight.
My apologies, Wendy and Aaron. I just wanted to let you know that we did have an issue, I guess, with the meeting link. So we are having people join us now. And so thank you everyone for being patient and understanding. Our apologies on behalf of OMLTA that the link didn't work. And sorry, Aaron and Wendy, for interrupting.
No problem.
Welcome, everyone.
Welcome, bienvenue. So we are speaking to you tonight from two regions across Turtle Island lands, which are the ancestral and traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the New Credit, as well as the lands of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation and the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. The lands from which Wendy and I are speaking this evening are Treaty 13, Treaty 14, and Treaty 19 lands. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples. La OPLV reconnaît que les activités de notre organisation et celles de nos membres se réalisent sur des terres des Autochtones. Notre siège social est accueilli sur le territoire non cédé de la nation algonquine et les territoires des Anishinabés et des Haudenosaunee. Nous voulons également reconnaître et faire l'honneur à la pérennité de la présence des Premières Nations, des Métis et des Inuits qui vivent sur ce territoire depuis des temps immémoriaux.
So we'd like to know a little bit about you, our audience. So could you please go to menti.com. The link is in the chat. Erin will be putting that in the chat. Or you can actually just scan the code that is there, and it will take you to a Mentimeter where we would like you to respond to the following question. What is your name, your role, and your level of familiarity with the CFR? The link that Erin has put in there should take you right there.
And while you're getting set up, I'm going to pop Mentimeter on the screen so we can see in real time the answers come in through Menti. So again, the link's in the chat and the code is on the screen and the prompt is pictured on Menti for you. And it's great to see that that link is indeed working. And thank you to everyone who is heading over to Menti to share a little bit about themselves, their name, their role, and their level of familiarity with the CEFR.
Oh, great. We have a lot of variety here. Yeah, so as I noticed everybody's information coming in, we have a variety from some people who are familiar with the CFR, but maybe just haven't used it in depth per se, and then some with there's a Delph Caractère, and some people who are quite familiar with the CFR. So that's great, and we have all different types of people: core French teachers, immersion coaches, facilitators. C'est fantastique. Okay, so yeah, those of you that aren't too familiar with it, we'll be sharing some principles of the CFR, and hopefully that will help you get acquainted with it and understand how it's effective in the classroom. Okay, so our goals for today. So to explore how classroom practices can include the CFR, principles of the CFR, by implementing meaningful and relevant tasks that our students could face in everyday real life situations. Also, to outline the importance of including practices of the universal design for learning so we can ensure success for all learners. Ultimately, we are aiming to reduce barriers to learning, to build student confidence, and develop communication competencies. Another goal is to learn how to leverage instructional technologies within in-person, hybrid, and virtual learning environments, because I know that we are all kind of in different points right now. So in order to provide differentiated learning opportunities with multiple means of engagement representation, and expression. Also, to focus on student-centered practices so that we can honor learner variability and provide engaging and inspiring learning opportunities. And finally, to develop anti-oppressive, asset-based approaches to assessment and evaluation to ensure that assessment is fair, equitable, and transparent. Ideally, we want all students to feel empowered to take responsibility for their own learning of the French language. Oh, thank you. So Dr. Christopher Emden shares the idea that, you'll see the quote there, the best teachers don't just keep teaching. Instead, they use their pedagogy as protest. They disrupt teaching norms that harm vulnerable students. So this is a lot of food for thought. So basically it implies that teaching is about reaching our students where they really are, based on their previous knowledge and lived experiences. Engaged learners whose voices are heard are better able to learn. We need to explore ways of moving beyond traditional models of learning in the FSL classroom. Our aim is to ensure that the teaching norms we put in place in today's virtual, hybrid, and in-person learning environments are relevant to the communities they serve and empower students to use the target language in ways that are meaningful to them. So to further understand what Dr. Emden is trying to say, we will take a look at a short clip of the importance of addressing our students' identities, needs, realities, and experiences. I want you to think about this question as we watch this clip. What models of learning accentuate each student's intersectional identities and allow them to achieve their full expression as learners? So think about that as you watch him. And then we will ask you to post your thoughts to that question in a Jamboard after this clip.
Okay, and I am going to drop the link to the video in the chat in case anyone's experiencing lag or having difficulty watching Dr. Christopher Emden's video. Video is about 3 minutes long, and so if you are experiencing any lag, the link is there for you in the chat, but here we go.
I'm going to turn off my video and volume too.
We have what I would argue is the best PPE for educators who are working within the pandemic of state-sanctioned violence. We have this tool that we can use to be able to mask a lot of the deficiencies of the existing pedagogy. We can engage in projects with young folks where they are doing things and creating things. But I want to implore us that in this moment, there's no project that we can create if it is not first focused on the needs of young people. If they're not defining for us the type of project that they need. If the projects that young folks are creating are not addressing racism, they're not addressing their realities and their experiences, they're not speaking truth to power about how they're being harmed by this moment, by how they're trying to still make sense of this moment, that we're not doing the work. Project-based learning is an anchor for social justice work at its very best. And if you're doing project-based learning without a focus on anti-racism in your pedagogy, then I would argue that you might as well be doing the same kind of pedagogies that other folks are doing. And digital project-based learning is also important. How are you utilizing social media as a way to be able to garner communities with young people where they can invite their peers to engage in dialogue and speak truth to power? How are you utilizing TikTok as a way for them to be able to create a new page and a whole new project where they can bring a cadre of folks together to not just advocate for their experiences, but also address race and racism and how they're being impacted by it? How are educators thinking about project-based learning, not just as a random project that we're doing, but looking at ourselves as a project to create? And I would argue that project-based learning is not just about what you do, it's also about what you deconstruct, what you reimagine, and what you reconstruct. And that trifecta of first deconstruct existing norms, reimagining what a future could be, and then doing the work to make something that speaks to the imagination. That the imagination is a first step, but the activation of the imagination to the creation of a project is the final frontier. That is the work. And look at yourself, guys, and deconstruct you. How have I been complicit in race-based practices that do not allow all young people to come alive? How have I been utilizing the curriculum as a baton that I swing at young folks to harm them? How are I standards that I am following to the feet impeding my ability to be the kind of person that stands in the gap for young folks and makes them alive. And when you're creating some of the project, I would make the argument you are deconstructing yourself as just an educator. You're imagining new possibilities for young folks and for yourself. And then you're building yourself back up to be not just a pedagogue, but a person that uses their pedagogy as process. Project-based learning is pedagogy for emancipation. Project-based pedagogy educators utilize their work as protest. You might not be able to march, but you can use the work that you do every day with young people as an opportunity to transform the world. And although short, and although succinct, that small concept of reimagining ourselves, reimagining our pedagogy, and nesting our projects and how we build ourselves up and how we allow young folks to be able to build projects that speak to their truths and their authenticities and their realities is the final frontier of the work.
I know that video wasn't always clear as he was speaking, but hopefully you're able to get his message. I know it's a tough question to think about. So again, what models of learning accentuate each student's intersectional identities and allow them to achieve their full expression as learners? So Erin has shared the Jamboard link in the chat. And if you could go there and just add a post-it of something that comes to your mind when you think of that question. It's a huge question. And just add it to that slide that she sees there, the Jamboard. I see everybody popping in. Yes, great. Inquiry-based learning, project-based learning. You know, the one thing that I heard him say, of course, was social media and TikTok. I mean, really, that's what all of our students are on. And we need to take advantage of that and to think about how we could use that in a positive way with our students. Gamified projects and tests, yeah. Oh, I like that project-based learning that specifically addresses social justice issues. Culturally relevant. Exactly. And when we talk about the CFR, when we get into that, I mean, we want to choose tasks that are relevant to our students, that they're culturally relevant, age appropriate, level appropriate. Peer learning, working groups, hopefully we'll be able to get back to that soon. You know, it's been difficult during COVID. I know about you that have been in the classroom, especially, you know, when we haven't been able to really have that opportunity to work in groups. My students are quite young that I teach, don't have technology in the classroom. So group work hasn't been possible. So I see it coming again soon, which is exciting. Interest inventories for sure. We want to appeal to the students' interest. We want to make sure that we are doing things that are meaningful to them. They see it and how it can be used in the real world. Oh, perfect. Someone just wrote real world scenarios, authentic tasks. Some of them are a little bit hard for me to read, Erin. They're a little bit small.
Assessment informed, student led.
Okay.
Community connected experiential learning, social agency, culturally relevant and responsive materials.
Yes.
Language is developed on a continuum. It's not a thing to be achieved. I love that. This allows room for various dialects, accents, and cultures.
Mm-hmm. Oh, building relationships and community. Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to pop back into the main deck. Thank you, everyone. Keep that Jamboard link handy. Yeah. We'll be returning to it a little later on.
Yeah, and feel free to add more even as we're talking. Okay. CFR inspired classroom. So we'll talk a little bit about the key elements of the CFR. And I know that some of you, especially I know one of us here is a Delft Caractère. so I know this isn't new to you, but I'm hoping that those that are a little bit familiar will be able to grab something from what we're about to talk about. So in a CFR inspired classroom, our students are social agents, making real life connections. Students should have an understanding of the purpose, the why of what they are learning, and how their learning will help them to navigate the real world. Students need to take responsibility for their learning. In a CFR-inspired classroom, learner autonomy and metacognition are of central importance. Learning, teaching, and assessment that is based around the principles of the CFR celebrate learner proficiency, not deficiency, right? It's all about what the students can do. A CFR-inspired classroom builds student confidence and competency in using the French language. So the chart that you see on the slide indicates the shift in language teaching. So you see that chart at the bottom, from a traditional FSL classroom to a CFR-inspired classroom. The focus in a CFR-inspired classroom is on interaction and communication, where learners are encouraged to take risks, right? We want them to make those mistakes. There is an understanding that making mistakes is part of the learning. Ultimately, we want our students to take an active role in their learning as they learn to engage in more spontaneous, authentic communication. On the next slide, you'll see learner proficiency is based on the principles of the Common European Framework of Reference, and it can be assessed using the CEFR proficiency levels. So the 6 proficiency levels within the CFR are A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, and C2. So I teach, right now I'm currently teaching junior core French, so my students are at the A1 level. And even intermediate core French, those students are still at A1, beginning A2 level. And that's kind of really the beginning level learner of the language. These levels focus on a student's ability to speak, read, write, and understand a language. There are specific indicators to describe each level. So I'll give you an example of some of the indicators of an A1 learner. So an A1 learner is able to understand and use very basic expressions to satisfy concrete needs, to introduce themselves, ask others questions about personal details, and interact simply, as long as the other person speaks slowly and clearly. So these examples of oral assessment wheels are from the Barrie Region CFR project. They can be found on the Ontario Modern Language Teachers Association website at www.omlta.org. These wheels outline the oral communication skills that students are able to do at the various CEFR proficiency levels. So as students progress on the wheel, they become more proficient at using the language. And really the philosophy of the CFR is embedded within our curriculum, even though it's not mentioned there, it's embedded there, and positions language proficiency according to specific levels. So I've used these wheels with my students. I give each one of these wheels at the beginning of the year, and they put it inside their duotang. And as they feel that they can do one of those spokes, like introducing themselves, then they color it in. And so students start to color in more of those books and feel more confident about the things that they can do, right? And it's focusing on that, what they can do on that proficiency. Okay. Now I want to get into a little bit more detail about CFR-inspired practices. So CFR-inspired practices involve an action-oriented approach. Action-oriented tasks, it's kind of a term that not everybody has their full grasp on, but its focus is on communicating for real purposes, using both verbal and nonverbal cues, as well as sociolinguistic conventions. Authentic, open-ended tasks, that means that there's multiple means to an end, are created with student input in a way that inspires and engages them in learning. The tasks that we do need to be age, ability, and culturally relevant. Right? We want them to be meaningful to the students, and they're in contexts that our students could face in everyday life in a variety of situations. I know that one person had said to me when I was first learning about the CFR, maybe a student would want to plan a trip to go to France. Well, my grade 4 student is likely not to go to France themselves. So planning for a trip like that is really not age appropriate for them at that point in their life. Students will negotiate their understanding while engaging in meaningful and authentic, spontaneous interaction. We know that before we can get to that spontaneous interaction, there will be a lot of practice, and that's okay. They have to do that rehearsed communication first, and then eventually they'll start to lead to a little bit more spontaneous as they apply what they've learned. A CFR-inspired classroom means that language learning is a lifelong commitment. We need our students to see that the skills and knowledge they are learning in the classroom are global skills that they can be applied in the real world. Contextualized vocabulary acquisition, such a big term, is required to successfully engage in action-oriented tasks. So in other words, the vocabulary, our students need to still learn vocabulary and language structures and grammar components, but they need to be relevant and purposeful and connected to the action-oriented tasks. They're not taught in isolation. Vocabulary and language instruction, sorry, I just repeated myself. As teachers, we need to try our best to ensure that our students have the skills, tools, and knowledge they need to successfully complete that action-oriented task. We can't just say to them, oh, here's a task, go do it. They need to be prepared and they need to have that practice in order to get there. The vocabulary and language structures that are required for the task need to be repeated, reused, and reinforced. This is so important. And we can achieve this by using the gradual release of responsibility model. Gradual release of responsibility is the process of scaffolding the learning of the vocabulary and language structures. We can't just expect our students to be able to go and do the task immediately. So we begin with a modeled practice and then continue with shared practice where we engage with the students, then guided practice, which is accompanied with our feedback, and finally, independent practice after they've done all of that, where students can begin to interact without our support. We cannot expect our students to use the language if they have not had time to practice it gradually. I don't know about you, but I've had many times where I send my students off and then I go right to English right away. And that's because they haven't had enough time to practice. They haven't had enough experience and practice with the language. Okay, CFR principles, a little bit more about it. So there's some great documents out there. So the document CFR in Ontario, Transforming Classroom Practice, was funded by the Government of Ontario to determine the impact. You know, what would CFR inspired practices do with the teachers and the students in an FSL classroom? So evidence showed that there was a larger focus on learning competencies and on authentic everyday uses of the French language by means of action-oriented tasks. So it was evident in the classroom. There was an increase in opportunities for students to practice the language. Using authentic resources motivated students to take ownership of their learning, provided tasks and situations that they can relate to, and it went hand in hand with our curriculum. In terms of assessment and evaluation, while implementing the principles of the CFR, teachers had a better understanding of the needs of each student and making assessment relevant to them. So to sum it up, this document shows that there's such a positive impact that the CFR can have on student achievement in FSL. So I'm going to skip down actually to the samples of action-oriented tasks. As I mentioned earlier, choosing action-oriented tasks that are age, ability, and culturally appropriate when planning a CFR-inspired classroom is key. Our students need to clearly understand the purpose of the task in the real world. So there's a document there. We have it linked in the slide deck, and it's called Samples of Action-Oriented Tasks. And it was created in order to assist teachers with developing tasks that are suitable and meaningful for our students and connected to the principles of the CFR. So when creating action-oriented tasks, we need our students to be able to articulate, when would I do this in real life? What's the purpose of the task? And what will the task accomplish, right? Our students really need to have a good grasp of that. Were you going to go to that, Erin?
I was. It's just taking a little while to load, so I put the link in the chat.
Yeah,
there you know what? It's on the screen now.
Yeah, we don't even need to go to that actually.
Okay.
All right, so just as our students describe their progress in proficiency in French using the CFR proficiency levels, we need to do that too. We need to do a little bit of a self-reflection on our own progression of implementing CFR inspired practices. And there's this CFR continuum of implementation. You'll see that's there. It's also linked in our slide deck. And This chart ranges our implementation of CFR on a continuum from non-implementation to full implementation. I know I'm not at full implementation, although I'd love to be. I'm kind of somewhere in the middle there, right? And I'm being honest with myself. So we need to ask ourselves, how have we truly embedded the principles of CFR in our classroom? We need to reflect upon our use of authentic communication, our focus on proficiency, our provision of highly interactive learning, and the importance we place on metacognition and learner autonomy. Really reflective practice provides us with a means to improve our practices in order to effectively meet the learning needs of our students. Now this website, so you might want to go there to the Transforming FSL. I'm not sure how many of you have been on this website, but it's fantastic. It was created to make professional FSL learning resources, best practices, and lesson plans and tools readily accessible for Ontario educators. A large number of the resources highlight and demonstrate the importance of implementing CFR-inspired practices in the classroom. We know that learner proficiency, engagement, and autonomy improve when teachers use an action-oriented approach. So the website reinforces the belief that all students have the ability to succeed in FSL. So you'll see the site here. What I tend to do is I click on all resources. That's kind of how I navigate, especially in some of the things that I'm familiar with it. So I click on all resources, and then you can see some more drop-down links once you click on that. You'll see that you can choose by grade, media, programs, topics, roles. I often go to the one under topics. I go to CFR, and the one that I really like, yeah, that's great, Erin, thank you. The one that I really like is the samples of student oral and written production based on CFR levels. So I know many of us are always, when we're trying to assess some of our students writing, you go down one, yeah, perfect. When we're trying to assess our students' ability, sometimes I don't know what my students should be speaking at. I'm really not sure what their writing should look like at their level. So this is really helpful because it gives you samples of, the written production that you might find in Delft, and it gives you an idea of an A1 learner. What would an A1er sound like? What would an A1 learner be able to write? Okay, so I know that Erin's computer is taking a little bit of time, but that's okay. So I just wanted to highlight that. It's a great website. Please check it out, and it's Transforming FSL.
All right, this brings us to Universal Design for Learning. And so Universal Design for Learning, otherwise known as UDL, is what we might consider an anti-oppressive and culturally responsive framework in that it limits educator bias and it allows learners to drive their learning based on their own needs, their lived experiences, their passions, interests, and cultures. By design, UDL intends to reduce barriers to learning, and it aims to meet learner variability by giving learners ownership over the learning process and by empowering them to leverage their own talents, expertise, and interests within the classroom. UDL could therefore be described as inherently containing responsive design tenets. And it invites educators to consider the identities and lived experiences of all of the students in their classrooms as they design the experiences. Learning for All, which is a guide to effective assessment and instruction for students, maintains that UDL and differentiated instruction are an effective as well as interconnected means of meeting the learning needs of all of the students in our classrooms. So for that reason, educators they're encouraged to focus on really the why of learning, and then focus on the what of learning and how of learning by providing multiple pathways for learners, including multiple means of engagement, representation, and action. And that's what you'll see pictured at the bottom of the screen are really those three key components of UDL, which is the engagement piece, how learners will show their thinking and demonstrate their understanding, and how they will express their ideas. And so as we move on to the next slide, you'll see pictured on the screen some graphics which represent universal design for learning. And if we look in the Ontario New Teacher Handbook for FSL, you'll notice that educators are reminded to present learning materials in a variety of ways, using a variety of multimodal forms, and providing learners with multiple pathways to make sense of the language. Things like flexible groupings, things like differentiated ways to practice, as well as differentiated resources. Lessons in the classroom and learning experiences should have the flexibility to amplify the natural abilities, interests, and passions of our students and reduce unnecessary barriers for learning. So we're always looking to provide our learners with multiple means of engagement. As much as possible, we should allow them to make choices about the learning experiences so that they remain invested, engaged, and empowered. So these are things like learning maps. You might consider exit tickets, co-constructing success criteria, opportunities for self-reflection and peer reflection, ideas like inquiry or genius hour and problem-based learning experiences are all pathways that really help to honor the individual strengths of our students. When we think about representation, it's also really important to offer multimodal scaffolds to learners and to show them how the learning is transferable to real world situations. Thinking back to that initial Jamboard, a few folks had highlighted the importance of relevant and real world connections. Thinking back to what Wendy shared about the CEFR and asking a young student to plan a trip to France. Well, that's not really a real world situation. That's not something that is authentic for that particular age group. So in practice, it would be helpful to think about things that are age appropriate, that are level appropriate, and that connect to the students' passions. Things like choice boards or hyperdocs, things like inquiry-based learning or single point rubrics. These are some of the examples we're going to see as we move forward. Now, if you are newer to Universal Design for Learning, you'll notice on the screen that there's a really fantastic graphic, and that came out of Dr. Katie Novak's work. And in that graphic, you'll see what exactly we mean by the ideas of multiple means of engagement, representation, and expression. But there's a short clip that I would like to share with you. And once again, I'm going to pop the link in the chat in case the internet connection is unreliable or anyone's experiencing lag. But this video will really help to understand what we mean by universal design for learning and why it's so important in our learning experiences.
Sorry, Erin, we're losing you. Your voice is breaking up.
Well, I'll try the video one more time and we'll see. It should be coming now.
People ask me all the time, what is UDL? UDL is Universal Design for Learning, and it is not a new name for differentiated instruction. There is a framework, Universal Design for Learning, and there is a framework, differentiated instruction. And although they can be used to complement each other, they are absolutely not the same thing. So let's talk about a little analogy that I like to use to explain the difference. Imagine for a moment that I was going to have a smashing dinner party. Now, if it was universally designed, I want to make sure that everybody is going to have an awesome meal at my party. And so I'm going to anticipate or predict the variability of possible guests. Now, as my best friends, you're all invited, and you're going to bring partners and friends, and I might not know exactly what they eat, but worry not. I can predict the variability. I'm going to predict that some people might be lactose intolerant, might be vegan or vegetarian, have cultural needs, or they might be picky eaters. And when I can predict this, I realize that it would be a really bad idea to serve a casserole, right? Because imagine you come into my party, you're thinking you're going to have an awesome time, boom, tuna noodle. Oh, I'm going to exclude a lot of people. But here's the thing. When I think universally, I recognize the importance of having different options and choices for everyone. And so when I universally design a party, I am going to serve a buffet. And the same thing happens in my classroom, is we can recognize and embrace the incredible variability of our students and identify the barriers that we know that some students face. And so if I recognize that I might have some students who struggle with language, some students who are decoding below grade level, some students who need additional challenges, I can create a buffet of ways for students to learn and share what they know using firm goals and flexible means. Now, differentiated instruction uses flexible groupings to make decisions about what specific students need. It's a great way to provide tier 2 support or additional intervention for your students. But when you plan using differentiated instruction, it can feel a little bit like you are a short order cook. If you're coming to my party and I say, I'm going to have to make something for the people who are lactose intolerant, and I have to have another dish for everyone who is vegan, and I want to make sure I have something gluten-free, I am now a short order cook and my kitchen is on fire. And here's the thing, you don't get to make choices for yourself. So we want to universally design instruction. We want to be really proactive and planful of identifying barriers and making sure that we're not reacting and providing additional wishes for every student. So the next time you feel a little frazzled and on fire with planning because you're worried about every single group of students, take a step back, identify some barriers, and make a flexible buffet and allow learners to self-differentiate and self-direct their learning. Because at a buffet, when everyone makes their own plate and you provide feedback and support those choices, I'm telling you, it is a much better party.
I really do love that expression of a flexible buffet. A flexible buffet of learning experiences is really a neat way to think about it.
Yeah, I think
And
your
so,
analogy
as
of
you
the
can
food is
see,
great.
yeah, absolutely, right? Because the kitchen's on fire if we're constantly trying to prepare hundreds of different things. But if we are identifying barriers and thinking about allowing learners to choose, then I think we can really help our learners to embrace flexible roles in the classroom. And so, as Katie Novak says, it's essential that we provide multiple pathways to learning outcomes. And we need to be mindful about the kinds of learning opportunities and action-oriented tasks that we offer, ensuring that they replicate those real life experiences and that they provide students with agency. So ultimately, it boils down to building the confidence of our learners, building those relationships in the classrooms and understanding what their needs are and how we can be responsive to those needs, and offering choice. And so for the next section, we're going to dive into ideas around instructional technologies and how choice is just as important in terms of the kinds of digital tools we leverage as it is the kinds of texts and provocations that we embed in our learning experiences. And so I like to say that reliable and equitable access to technology is about much, much more than just access to hardware. It is about connecting learners to information, to people, and to the tools that they need to be successful. So empowering our French language learners to explore and try different types of technology can help to promote higher level thinking, independent learning, creativity, and a lifelong passion for language learning. So the crux of it is that access to both non-digital and digital resources amplifies learners' voices to engage with the world. And that's what it's about. It's about communication and relationships and building our learners' confidence. So on this next slide, you're going to see a resource that we have created for you. And in this resource, you will see that there are a series of digital tools that you can share with students. So it's intended as a standalone resource, and I'm going to pop the link in the chat for you. You're going to have the opportunity to spend a few minutes exploring this resource, and then we're going to be revisiting the Mentimeter in order to document our thinking. So this resource includes examples of no tech, low tech, and high tech resources that are designed to inspire, enhance, and extend language learning in the classroom. You'll see that within the resource itself, we have 3 tabs. We have engagement, and we have some examples of digital tools that help to foster engagement. We have expression and some digital tools, low tech, medium tech, and high tech, that help to foster student creativity and student voice. And we have representation. Again, different digital tools that will help learners to represent their thinking. So this resource has been aligned to Universal Design for Learning principles, and it has been intentionally created to mirror the different functionalities that we're looking for in our classrooms. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you about 5 minutes. And I'm going to pop back into this main slide deck. And what you'll notice is that there is a provocation on the screen. So we're going to invite you to visit the Mentimeter, and you're going to be using the Mentimeter to document your thinking about this resource. So there's 2 links you're going to need. You're going to need the link to the digital landscape, which is in the chat. And then you're going to need to either scan the QR code once again, or you're going to need to use the link that you see pictured on the screen in order to connect to the prompt. So the prompt is, what resource or digital tool would be effective in empowering learners to engage meaningfully? So we'll give you about 5 minutes to explore the resource and see if there are any resources or tools that spark an interest and that you think would connect well with your learners. Alternatively, if you have some digital tools or resources that work well in your classroom, then we would invite you to share those resources and ideas with us. So I'm going to put the link to the Menti in the chat, and then I am going to put a timer on the screen. It will count you down, and then we are going to be looking at your responses to this provocation.
The Menti link doesn't work. It looks like there's a W missing at the front end.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Good catch.
Thanks, Neely.
I'm going to give you about 2 more minutes in the interest of time. I know there was an issue with our link at the beginning, so we may be a few minutes over time, but I'm going to give you about 2 more minutes to respond. And again, you're taking a look at the digital landscape guide, seeing if any resources or digital tools spark an interest, and if you think they'll connect with your learners, please let us know on the Menti. Alternatively, if you have some resources or digital tools that you find effective in your classroom to empower learners to engage meaningfully, please do share those with us. So about just under 2 minutes to add your voice.
I saw that someone wrote Flipgrid, and actually Flipgrid is such a great tool because you can turn off the sharing component of it. I turn it off so that my students don't feel uncomfortable that all the rest of the class is going to see what they've recorded. And I also turn off the video option. Some of the times they just like to record their voice, and then I just view it myself. And the students, it's so easy for them to use, and I find it such a great tool.
Yeah, and it's all about sharing the student voice. I saw someone else had referenced Mote, for instance, which is a way for students to record audio, and they can embed their recording directly in slides. So it's really giving them a variety of ways to express themselves. And like you said, by turning off the video, then they may perhaps feel more comfortable sharing, just like they are with things like Mote.
Oh, exactly. I also saw that somebody wrote Mani Musical. That's something that I'm actually starting next week. I use music all the time in the classroom. I think it really touches on so many like cultures, everything, and gives students such a great way to listen for familiar words and words that they recognize. Music is so powerful, and that's something I use all the time. So thank you for sharing that.
And what I love is that so many of these resources are to help build communicative competencies. So you spoke earlier about, if you went to school 15 years ago, then you were perhaps more focused on grammar and reading and writing. And more recently, we've shifted to this focus on communicative competencies and action-oriented tasks. And so many of these tools help to promote that, like Vocaroo, Flipgrid, Idelo, lyrics training, Mani Musical. Really, we can see this shift in practice.
I saw someone typed in there, the Minecraft EDU. I'm not even sure what that is necessarily. However, I have had my students use Minecraft at home. So one of the tasks I had them do is to create like an ideal school, what their ideal school would be like. And they had to share it on a video, like they used Minecraft, which is something they love to do at home. And they built an ideal school and shared, what would be in that school, the rooms, what they'd be used for, and everything. So, and why their school would be better than anyone else's.
Fantastic. Great ideas. And I'll just comment quickly on a comment in the chat. Pamela shared, you do need to check with your board if it's allowed for all students. We have limited access for younger students, and this will vary board to board. So it's very important that you check with your privacy policy to see what platforms are allowed. Wendy and my board, for instance, Minecraft EDU is part of our student packages. And so it's the creative version versus the survivor version, which is available in the personal edition, but really it's phenomenal for geography inquiries, French inquiries, and embedding the language and making connections to passions of students. And gaming is definitely a passion of intermediate learners.
Oh, for sure.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. I'm going to pop back into our main deck, being conscious of the time, and I'm going to switch back to that present mode. Please do feel free to continue adding your voice to our Mentimeter. And so that should load up in just a second. I'm going to actually go this way. I think that will help with the bandwidth. And so in the FSL classroom, let me just try and make that a little bit bigger. Some of the best practices include integrating models of learning that are learner-centered, as we saw, and rooted in the experiences of the communities we serve. Effective learning opportunities promote those critical, creative, and higher order thinking skills. And it allows our learners to explore meaningful real-world tasks and explore and make connections to their interests, their aspirations, and their passions. So we have a couple other resources to share with you this evening. And what you'll see pictured on the screen are a series of choice boards. And so choice boards are one possible model of learning for FSL learners. They engage and empower learners by providing them with voice and choice in terms of the kinds of experiences they choose to explore. Ultimately, they help FSL learners engage actively and invite them to take responsibility for their own acquisition of the French language. And what you'll see if you click on the link in the chat, or you click ultimately on the link in the slide deck, is a series of choice boards which are focused by strand. So we have a choice board here focusing on reading. We have one for writing. We have one for speaking and listening. And we have one for intercultural connections. And so when you click on that link, what you'll notice is that each of these boxes is hyperlinked, and you can tap on those boxes to access the links and resources for reading, writing, so on and so forth. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you maybe 2 minutes to take a look. And again, we're going to invite you to think about which experiences resonate. And then we're going to use a strategy called the waterfall strategy to share our ideas. And if you're teaching online and you're not familiar with the waterfall strategy, this is a great protocol to frame participation. So what you'll do is you're going to write a response in the chat, but you're not going to click enter. And then I'm going to count you down. I'm going to say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Then you'll click enter. And just like a waterfall, we will have a waterfall of ideas, and we'll be able to take a look and see if there are some common trends there. So I'm going to give you about 2 minutes. And during that time, I invite you to explore the choice board link, and I'll keep that on the screen for you. The link is in the chat, and we're looking for you to share an idea that sparks an interest for you and your learners.
And those choice boards are basically what Dr. Katie Novak was saying, right? It's that buffet of choice for our students, right?
Absolutely, the buffet of experiences, and the students can pick and choose what works for them.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, honoring learner variability. All right, at this point, you have about 45 seconds. I'm looking for you to start typing your answer in the chat. Which of these experiences resonates with you, and do you think would help to empower the learners in your classroom? Don't click enter. Wait for me to count you down. In about 30 seconds, I'm going to give you a countdown, and then I'll be looking for you to click on enter so that we get that waterfall of ideas. All right, I'm going to count you down from 10, 9, 8. Get ready to click enter. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Enter. There we go. I can see those responses coming in. I really do love this waterfall strategy for online because it helps to create that sort of authentic feel of a conversation as all the answers come in. So we can see Rebecca shared about digital breakouts. They are one of my personal favorites. She had students create their own works in person, works online. She even used Geniali, which is very popular in Europe, to create breakouts. Mani Musical, coding is new. Andrea shared that coding would be easy to implement, would help to foster student engagement. And then we have like podcasts, for instance, such as Petit Curieux, very short podcast, great to spark conversation. Wonderful, thank you so much. And so we are moving into the final section of our webinar this evening, and we'll be just a few minutes over time because unfortunately the link didn't work and we did start a little bit late. So moving on to our final section. Back to you, Wendy.
Okay, well, this section is a tough one to kind of summarize in 10 minutes, but it's assessment and evaluation, and it'd be hard to kind of not have a session without talking about it and the importance of it. So first, I want to talk about critical consciousness. It's essential for us as teachers to realize our own biases and values and to take action against them in an effort to strive towards equality for all learners. By recognizing and removing implicit and explicit biases that we have as educators, all students can be given the opportunity to achieve success. So providing equitable assessment means that we ourselves engage in self-assessment, our own self-assessment, to reflect upon how assessment and evaluation are delivered in the classroom. So you'll see 3 different documents there. You'll see Growing Success, which basically states that the purpose of assessment is to inform instruction, guide next steps for improvement, and help students monitor and navigate their progress. Then there's also the FSL, the framework for French as a second language in Ontario schools. And that basically was developed to maximize opportunities for all students to reach their full potential in FSL so that they have the confidence and ability to use French effectively in their daily lives. And then the third document, of course, is Learning for All, which is a guide to effective assessment and instruction for all students. And that shares the belief that all students have the ability to succeed. So all of these documents can be found on the Ontario's Ministry of Education website. So they are very worthwhile documents that you can't really address assessment and evaluation without talking about them. Okay, so I'm just going to explain a little bit more about these. So learning goals and success criteria. The purpose of creating learning goals that are derived from our curriculum and connected to the action-oriented task is so that our students have a clear understanding of what they should know and be able to do by the end of a task. Co-created success criteria describes what success of the skills required to accomplish the task looks like. When specific descriptive feedback of the success criteria is provided during assessment, both the teacher and student are able to monitor the learning. Where possible, success criteria should be connected, if possible, not always, but to all 4 categories of the achievement chart. Knowledge, understanding, thinking, communication, and application. Providing multiple and varied ways for learners to demonstrate learning, just like the choice boards that Erin had shared earlier, and to make their thinking visible allows for authentic learning experiences that honor learner identity and variability. The use of equitable assessment guides every part of the student's individual learning process. The triangulation of data in FSL Classroom means that assessment is collected through observations, conversations, and student products or learner products. Observations involved a planned process of taking anecdotal notes. Engaging in conversations means posing questions to students to make their thinking explicit, such as through discussions, conferences, or follow-up questions. And student products are produced by students as a means to demonstrate their understanding, to demonstrate their learning, and can include such items as performance tasks, videos, podcasts, demonstrations. Using the triangulation of data enhances the validity and accountability of the assessment and assures that the most informed and appropriate decisions are being made on behalf of each student. Gathering, assessing, and setting student goals using the 3 types of data works effectively for in-person, hybrid, and virtual settings. And the last one that we wanted to address was ongoing student-centered assessment. Feedback and reflection processes improve student outcomes by limiting systemic biases. Active involvement and engagement of students in the assessment process connects them with their learning and fosters reflection and a drive to learn more. Descriptive feedback needs to be clear, specific, meaningful, and timely to support improved learning and achievement. So if I give some students some feedback a month after a task that they've been working on, it's not going to be very effective. So we have one last Jamboard that we'd like you to participate in. And we'd like you to respond to the question that Anna posted in the Jamboard. So what does equitable assessment mean to you? And what does it look like in the FSL classroom? So think about that question. Erin will put the link to the Jamboard in the chat. It's actually the same Jamboard that we used earlier. So if you go there, it's on page 2 of the Jamboard, and Erin's going to pop that up. It's a tough question. Equitable
And while folks are answering that Jamboard prompt, I'm just going to redirect to one of the questions in the chat. Rebecca was having some challenges figuring out where to go on the OMLTA website.
Okay.
I know quite a few of you were joining us a little bit late because the link wasn't working. So I'm just going to circle back in the slide deck while folks are in the Jamboard so that I can show you where to source that information. So when we began the session, we spoke about the Dare to Unmute FSL, which is linked on the OMLTA website. So when you load up the OMLTA website, as I'm doing now, you're going to be visiting the Dare to Unmute section. So under upcoming events,
Yeah, it's so
down at the bottom right, you're going to see where it's
Sorry,
Dare to
Erin,
Unmute.
it's not showing it this time. Your
Okay.
screen.
The link's in the chat, and Wendy's got it on
There
her
we go.
screen there.
Yeah, I was trying to show you kind
Okay.
of on my phone. Once you click on Dare to Unmute FSL at the bottom of the website, then it'll take you right there to where to access everything. Yep, and I think Erin's is coming up soon too, slowly but surely.
Yeah, it's just going to take a moment. So I'm going to pop the direct link. When you click on that right link, like Wendy showed, you're going to see the new series of modules. And if you scroll down, you are going to see a link that says click here. And when you click there, it's going to bring you right into a site where all of the modules are housed, including the videos that we spoke about earlier. And you will also have access to the viewer's guide and the glossary and some additional resources. So I've got all 3 links in the chat for you, and that should help you to source the slide deck that we're sharing tonight. The module videos are not yet there because they're going to be posted once we are finished recording the sessions. But the 3 videos are on the OMLTA YouTube channel currently, and they will be linked on the website. Rebecca, the reason is that the slides are being released after these sessions, right? So we have tonight's session, we have next week's session. They're going to be updated with those links, the recording and the slide deck, once the webinars are complete.
Oh, great, Erin, I see the Jamboard where some people, I know that some of you have been exploring the OMLTA website, and that's totally fine as well. So I see, yeah, co-created goals and expectations. You know, the thing with co-created, we wanted to co-create it with our students, but we also have to guide them in the right direction too, right? They need a little bit of assistance with co-creating that success criteria. So it's not just having them do it on their own, that's for sure. and meaningful and enhance future learning. Absolutely. Multiple chances, different ways to show their learning. Absolutely, multiple chances. If we give our students some feedback, we want them to be able to apply that feedback, right? And give them another opportunity to use that feedback to improve their learning. And use of digital and physical tools, absolutely. Sometimes digital tools aren't always available in the classroom. So yes, there's other different tools that we can be using as well. Yeah, such as les dictionnaires visuels. J'utilise les dictionnaires visuels tout le temps. Okay, so Erin, do you want to head back to our slideshow? Thank you, everyone, for that feedback. I know it's starting to get late, and I'm sure a lot of you have been teaching all day, like myself, and I know Erin's been doing quite a few webinars today. So we'll take you to the last slide, and we just want to mention that this module was created under the leadership of OMLTA, and OMLTA is a nonprofit professional association that's been supporting French as a second language and international languages teachers of all programs and grade levels since 1886. So it's been around for a long time. Today, it continues to be the leader in professional learning and advocacy, inspiring and connecting Ontario's French and international languages educators. So this module was designed to support FSL teacher retention and recruitment by deepening the understanding of the directions, principles, and content of the Ontario curriculum policy documents for all three of our provinces' FSL programs: Core French, Extended French, and French Immersion. So we hope that you were able to find some uses from this. We would like to also thank the Ministry of Education for its financial support in developing this module. And thank you to all of you that attended and were here today and participated in our conversation. So we will stick around if you have any questions. And I know some of you just want to go, maybe have dinner if you haven't had that yet, or probably get prepared for the next day. Oui, bonne nuit à tous.
Bonne nuit, bonne soirée. Merci beaucoup.
I will stop the recording here because I know sometimes people are more comfortable asking questions if the recording has stopped, so I will do that. And thank you very much, Wendy and Erin, for your outstanding presentation this evening. I really appreciate it.
Oh, de rien, Jennifer.